Alan, thanks so much for joining us for the live chat and the Q&A. Much appreciated.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I've got about 5 questions for you, about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll start asking some questions on from the crowd as well. So if the coaches want to, you're all using the chat room really well here. Everyone, we've got a worldwide representation. So if you want to drop your question in as this goes, I'll pick it up at about 25-30 minutes, and then we'll go for another 25-30 minutes. We'll try and get Alan out of here at by 1 o'clock. So thanks for joining us, Alan. The first question I have, and philosophy is obviously something that we talk about and something that I wanted to bring to the front in this conversation. And your personal background, it's a lot of personal backgrounds have a lot to do with coaching philosophy. Your personal background, so many sports, this big rugby tradition in South Africa. I mean, how much of other sports have you taken into your football philosophy?
I think I'm a great appreciator of all different sports, and I think part of my journey, I've been exposed to different sports. Growing up in South Africa, there's so many sports like there are in the US and like there are in Canada, where people play and appreciate all different sports. So rugby, and we're the world champions. I was going to have to slip that in at some stage. You knew that. Um, Rugby, I played it as a young kid. I had to start playing and focusing on soccer probably at about 15 years old. So I stopped playing rugby at that time. And I use a bit of that in my philosophy. And it's a big part of it is just the unity. Obviously, rugby is such a physical sport where everybody has to be on the same page. And that's part of what I've taken from that sport into my philosophy, is making sure that everybody is there to help. But also you have to self-empower your players too. And the rugby culture is very different than the soccer or football culture, because a captain in a rugby team is very different than a captain in a football team. They have to make so many decisions on the field, and they truly are an extension of the coach or the manager. So I definitely have taken part of rugby into my coaching philosophy. And another part of it too is I've spent a lot of time in South Africa, but I've also spent a lot of time in Canada. And Canada exposed me to ice hockey. And what I like about ice hockey is I'm not a fan of fighting in ice hockey, and there's different players that are responsible for that. They're called goons. But I think in an ice hockey team, everybody understands their role. You have players that are on the first line, second line. Those are essentially the prima donnas, the players that are there to do certain skillful things. And then you'll have players on the third and the fourth line who are players that are going to really come in and rough it up a little bit at times and sometimes do the dirty work. But everybody in an ice hockey team understands their role. And I think that's a big part of my philosophy, not only just with players, but with your staff and managing a club, particularly at the professional level, is we all have different jobs to do. And let's all be aware of what our jobs are and go do them to the best of our abilities, but also help the other people do their jobs too at the same time. So those are probably, outside of football, those are probably the two sports I've taken the most from, and probably been exposed to the most, that have allowed me to learn from those sports. I've been exposed to ice hockey, but don't think you're going to see me ever on ice skating, because that would be very dangerous and not a good sight to behold.
Yeah, I'm going to go back there to the rugby, because like it's a culture that there's a lot of the things that we kind of complain about as a soccer coaching community. Rugby seems to have it in abundance, and one of those is leadership. Is there any aspects that you perhaps modify from a traditional soccer environment, that you almost try and get that with older players, get those leadership and those voices through?
Yeah, what I've done, and I've taken a little bit from rugby, but I think it's more just from leadership, is within my philosophy. In the last few clubs I've worked with, I've always had leadership forums, and I take players and I try to get equal representation from all the different backgrounds that our players have within our team, and have this leadership forum where we come together. We're doing it a lot actually now because of going through this pandemic and spending a lot of time like this online and communicating with our group. But when we're in a normal lifestyle, we meet probably once a month and give the players a forum to speak to myself, speak to our coaching staff, what are challenges, what's working with the team, what's not working. I found that to be very, very beneficial in terms of, for myself, building relationships with our players, and passing ownership of the team onto the players. We've done that here right now. Like we're going to have our next leadership forum call with our group tomorrow. It's all the different leaders on our team. We're going to bring a guest in to the group. It's an ex-colleague of mine that I worked with, and pick his brain a little bit. But we want the players to come up with questions. We don't want them to be silent. It's their team, and it's not just their team when they step on the pitch. It's their team off the pitch. They drive the environment. They drive the culture too at the same time.
Brilliant, brilliant. Leadership on to development. The impossible, sometimes definitely difficult, sometimes impossible task for a head coach at the professional level: develop talent and win games at the same time. And like Martin O'Neill was talking about this last week on that chat, you did both at the USL level with Alfonso Davis, and then reaching the conference final in 2016. I mean, what are some ways that you've achieved it, that you found, or that in your processes, in your environment?
It's almost impossible, to be honest, because if you look at what development is, and then you look at what performance is result-based, and managers around the world, or we're all assessed on how many wins we get. And then development is about providing opportunities. And when you provide young players who you want to develop with opportunities, you know they're going to fail at some stage, because part of developing is failure. So to bring them together, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's very, very difficult. And we had to suffer. I think people have asked me a lot of questions about that 2016 group that we put together, where we took the youngest team on a very small budget to the conference final. And we did that by suffering in 2015. In 2015, we played a lot of teenagers, we played a lot of first-year pros, and we lost a lot of games. I don't think I've ever lost as many games as I lost in 2015. And it was a very humbling and challenging experience for me personally, because I came from the college game where we were winning our conference, going to the national tournament, going to Final Fours, and all of a sudden I was coaching a team that we were getting smacked every single week. And it wasn't fun, but we stayed true to what we needed to do. We believed in those young kids. We kept on playing them even when we were losing, and some of them weren't playing very, very well. And then we came into 2016 with those players being a year older, a year wiser. They were definitely better in the environment. Their training habits had significantly improved. They understand what it meant to be professionals. And then what we also did, and this is a key part of it, is I went out and recruited a spine of seasoned, experienced USL players. These were guys that knew the rigors of the travel. They knew the rigors of playing in different professional environments. And they came in and significantly improved the training environment. But these were the guys that really took the team on their backs. And the young kids came with them. And it would allowed so many of those young guys, we were playing 15, 16, 17-year-old players all the time. And then we included Alfonso Davis, who was 15 at the time when I gave him his professional debut, into that group. And the group flourished. The guys started to believe in themselves. And when you get confident, great things can happen. And you look at that same group, how much they improved between 2015 and 2016. I think it was a big part was the adjustments we made in terms of how we managed and controlled the environment. But a big part was the players themselves, how they improved and they started to believe in themselves. We started that season in 2016, I think it was the first 10 games undefeated with a bunch of babies. And then we went into the postseason and we were playing kids in playoff games and going in unafraid and playing with courage and not putting any pressure on ourselves, but having absolute belief in ourselves as a group and individually that we could have success. And I think that's the best possible environment you can try put together. And I say try because you cannot have that success every single year. When you're playing young players, you're going to have good moments like we did in 2016, but you're also going to have some of those tough moments like we had in 2015.
It's interesting that part that you say that you went out and recruited that spine. And when we hear about that United team, the Fergies got through, and you'll never win anything with kids. But at the top of that team, there were top professionals. What was your I suppose, what was the benchmark for finding out that they were not only good character, or not only good players, but they were the right characters? How did you decipher in their personalities?
In terms of the spine, the players that we brought in for the spine,
Yeah, those older players.
yeah, a lot of, and I'll single out one player. A lot of it was through the recruitment phase. It was I'd coached against some of the players, so I'd seen how they performed, and I saw how they carried themselves and how they carried the teams that they played for before in the USL. And then I really went and did background research, and I'll give you a very good example is Kyle Gregg, who is a seasoned USL player. And he was still relatively young when he came to us. I think he was 24 at the time, and I saw a lot in him, having coached against him in the USL in terms of what a player he was on the field. He was a player who was willing to do everything he could to set his team up for success, but he also scored goals. But I also knew a lot of people off the field from my college coaching career that had either worked with him or knew him as a kid growing up, and just knew what type of person he was. He was and is a humble kid who always put the team first. And he's a striker. And you see a lot of selfish strikers that have that mentality, and sometimes have to have that mentality that it's about me. I'm going to go do what I have to do to score goals for the team, which he did. He scored a lot of goals for us that year, but he was also a team player. He's a guy who was helping the young guys, and he's one of the first professional players that Alfonso Davis interacted with. And I don't know if him and Alfonso are still in touch with, but they developed a little bit of a relationship there. But Kyle developed relationships with every single young player that we had, and bring in players like that had that type of character, selflessness, and were willing to help other players was a big part of why those individual players had success and the team had success. We had teenagers at the end of the year sign MLS contracts, but Kyle also signed an MLS contract at the end of that year. So he got rewarded for his efforts that he put in for himself, but he also put in for the team too.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know if you watched the Sunderland.
Yeah, I have.
Entry. Like, whenever they're going through, now granted, it's we're only seeing a fragment of what happens, but whenever they're going through, there's 2 seasons in a row where they've obviously got their recruitment wrong in a big way. They never once had a conversation about those non-measurables, character. Like, no one's picking up the phone and talking to agents and people, but they're not picking up the phone talking to former teammates. Now they might be, but they're not showing that there. But that's so important in the recruitment phase.
I think in professional football, sometimes we get caught up in trying to solve problems quickly. And having watched that Sunderland series, you could see they felt the pressure on the deadline day in the second series. They were absolutely scrambling and doing things you should not do. And I think that happens in professional football a lot. And I've been in environments where we've had situations like that, and sometimes I think we've got it right, and sometimes I think we've got it wrong. And I think it's how do the collective group manage the pressure in those situations. But recruitment is everything. You can be the best coach in the world, and unless you bring in the right players that are have the right ability, but then also have the right character, you're not going to have much success. You have to focus in that recruitment phase on finding the right players, but really going out and finding the right character. Character is everything. And I know character, culture, philosophy, these are words people use a lot, and they can mean so many different things, but you have to figure out what those words mean for you. And then when you figure out what they are, you have to find the right ones in terms of players that fit in with what you're trying to put on the pitch.
We talked there about a young team, a young club in Cincinnati that goes into the MLS with a fanatical. We talked about Cincinnati before we started recording. A fanatical fan base, Nippert Stadium packed. How challenging is it to make sure there's an attacking product on the pitch, but then also make sure that, hey, we need to get results here as well? How did you balance that?
Not very well, because I got fired after 11 games. So it's the only time I've ever been dismissed in 20 years of coaching. So yeah, probably go ask somebody else that question, Gary. No, in all seriousness, I learned more from those few weeks of unsuccess or failure, I think, than I learned from success for 2 decades. It was very, very difficult, and it's been spoken about a lot by a lot of different people, but I can give you some insight in terms of what happened on the inside. I think from a big macro perspective, getting a team admitted into Major League Soccer and having such a quick turnaround was not setting anybody up for success. And then bringing so many new pieces in all the time from a staff perspective that were either technical based, front office based, anywhere in the club. It was just literally, you'd walk around the office and you'd see new people coming in the club every single day. And the club went from an environment where I can safely say, as the manager of that club in the USO, where I knew everybody that worked for that club. I took it upon myself to go into the ticket sales staff and get to know them, get to know the marketing people, get to know everybody, and make sure that we're all on the same page and all working towards the same goal. And when things happened so quickly between the announcement and when the league started, it became very, very difficult. And this is the beauty of, we always say man management. It's not just man management. It's not just team management. There's club management too. A big part of being a manager of a big club, and Cincinnati is a big club, is vertical management. How do you manage up? How do you manage down? How do you manage laterally? There's so many different pieces to that. So it was very, very difficult to try and instill any type of philosophy. There was so many new people coming in, and everybody running and sprinting in different directions. You have to have everybody in the same page to try set people up for success. And we tried to maintain a bit of the culture that we created. We had huge success in 2018, beating USL records and winning the season and all that, and playing some very, very good football. And then when we started in MLS, I think after 6 weeks we were tied, or 6 games we were tied for first or second in the Eastern Conference. And then we had a bad 3 weeks where we lost 5 games in a row, and that obviously led to my dismissal. But a big part of that culture challenge is everybody has to be on the same page first off, but everybody has to also understand the pressure that you're going through, and you have to have people that are able to deal with that pressure. And I've always said this as a coach. People will chuckle because they've heard me say this: is don't get too high with the highs and don't get too low with the lows. You have to remain even keeled through that process, and it's difficult to do, and people manage that in different ways. Not sure if that, I went on a bit of a tangent there. I'm not sure if that actually answers the question, but it was very, very difficult to evolve from a philosophy, and that's an interesting word, perspective. How do we take the team that played a certain way in 2018 and then try play in a similar way in 2019 when you've now gone to a higher level? We went from being a club that was spending at the upper echelons of the league to now spending at the bottom of the league, going in and trying to appease a fantastic fan base. And how do we go and play a good brand of football that's going to appease them, but help us win games and keep people in their jobs? And that obviously is a major challenge to do at that level and many levels around the world.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like what you're saying, and I think of young English managers that almost they have to win games to get their profile raised, but then all of a sudden you're ultimately going to lose a few games. Like Eddie Howe's the only one I could think of that has stayed through the good and the bad. I mean, I suppose, is it the management of expectations when you're doing well from above, or is it the noise that's coming in from, or even habit of winning games? Like, what's the toughest thing to manage when that starts to losing a game or two?
Well, you mentioned job security there, and management of your job is equally as important as managing the on-field product. For me, people can talk about philosophy all the time. It's like, how do you want to play the game? I can tell you how I want to play the game. I've got countless models and templates and presentations, but I've had to morph that wherever I've gone because of different pressures in different jobs. But it's also dependent on what's your budget and do you have the ability to go out and get the players that you need. So I find it very interesting when people talk about things like philosophies, because your philosophy is not as autonomous as just talking about the philosophy. It ties into so many different things. Like it's the environment, it's the security of your job, it's what players do you have at your disposal. It's such an interesting part of the game because I'm a lover of Guardiola, I'm a lover of Klopp, I'm a lover of all these different huge managers that we all know and we love and we all analyze into depth. but I'd never been in a job where I could go single-handedly do what Guardiola's done, because he is in a position, and he's worked incredibly hard to get there, where he can do everything that he wants to do. He can tell you exactly what his philosophy is because he has the resources and the support, which is huge, to be able to do what he'd like to do.
Brilliant, brilliant. One more for me, and then we've got a couple of questions come in here. So yeah, if you guys want to start throwing the questions our way, this one jumped out to me. I read in a recent interview with you. You said that for advice for younger coaches, if you want to coach in the professional game, be prepared, sacrifice, and take risks. And I never hear take risks. I've spoke to coaches about this over the past 6 months, a year. Do you think that coaches are somewhat more risk averse in their development today, looking for that dream job where they can get that security?
It's very, very difficult to take that next step, and to take a big step is even more challenging. And you have to be willing to take risk, or a better choice of words, probably calculated gambles. And you have to believe in yourself. I've coached at every level under the rainbow, and a big part of that is belief in myself, obviously, and challenging myself. But also, I've been willing to take those risks. I had colleagues when I left the college game, when I stepped up to the professional game, and I had colleagues that I'd worked with, and they're still friends of mine to this day. They were like, "Oh, I had this opportunity to go to this club, or I had this opportunity to go to this club," and I'd throw it back at them. I'm like, "Well, why do you take it?" And a big part of it was the inability to take risk. You have to be willing to take a risk, and it has to be more calculated, of course. Otherwise, you're a fool if you're just taking risk for the sake of saying, "Well, hopefully it's going to stick." You have to put yourself in positions where you're setting yourself up for success. And my risk and my gamble that I took in my career, I left Simon Fraser University, which is an NCAA Division II program. I played there many decades ago, and I'd been there for 7 years as the head coach, and we'd been to the NAIA Final Four when I first got there. We went back-to-back NCAA Division II Final Fours. I probably could have been there for the next 10, 20, 30 years of my life. But my calculated gamble was I left them. I didn't have to uproot my family at that time to go join the Vancouver Whitecaps. It's in Vancouver. I stayed, and we stayed in our same house. Kids could stay in school, wife could stay in her job, and I moved and I jumped into the professional game. But we knew, and we discussed that as a family, we knew when we made that adjustment, we were exposing ourselves now to a whole different lifestyle. And here we are today, sitting in an apartment in Colorado, and it's part of the journey. My wife knows this, and she supports me with this, that we're going to have to live the journey, because professional football is a wild ride. It is an absolute roller coaster. You'll hopefully have some good moments, but you're going to have some tough moments too. And we left the Whitecaps. We went to Cincinnati. It was an absolute whirlwind there. I went there to help build a club, and they fired the manager, John Hawks, in preseason. I wasn't even asked if I wanted to take the job. I was just told to take the job. I took the job. It allowed me then to have success there. Our Open Cup run, winning the USL. I became an MLS manager through that calculated gamble or risk. Things ended up not the way we'd like them to in the end. And here we are now with a fresh, beautiful project in Colorado. So yeah, you have to sacrifice. I think anybody tells you don't have to sacrifice is lying. This is not easy, but it's a beautiful journey. It's the game we all love, and it's something that we're so passionate about. And I'm incredibly passionate about the project I have here now today. This is something we're building something. Our club's building a brand new stadium that's going to be ready here downtown in Colorado Springs next year, which in my opinion is going to be one of the most beautiful stadiums in North America. And we're trying to build and work with the club to reinforce the positives and adjust some things that we can really improve on and continue to take this club forward. So yeah, calculated gamble is probably better than saying risk, but there definitely is risk involved in this journey, that's for sure.
Yeah, you're going to love this one. So let's go back from this project, this beautiful project that's happening in Colorado at the minute. And Chris McLaughlin has asked, all right, so you're offered a top job. So let's just say it's the Netflix show that we've all watched, and you can tell from the outside that there's culture and ethos within the club conflicts with your values. Do you take the job and adapt to the club and try to shift it and kick it forward, or what would you do in that situation?
Brilliant question. Today I'd say no. A few years ago, I would have said yes, because I had to take a risk and I had to take a calculated gamble. Um, it depends on where you are. There's no simple answer to that question, because it depends on the individual person and it depends on where they are in their journey. If you're somebody who's starting out, I would say, you know what, go take that job. Go throw yourself into that fire, and you're going to have to deal with things that you probably won't enjoy and you won't like, and see what sort of improvements you can make. And obviously hold your head up high and make the right decisions that work and stick to your values and your ethos. But for me personally now, I wouldn't take that job now. I'm in a good place now where I work with good people. There's a vision with the club. We have major challenges and major limits. We're one of the smaller budget clubs in our league, where now I have to think outside of the box. And those are things that I enjoy doing. I'm having to be incredibly resourceful here with a smaller staff, smaller budget, but working on something that I'm thoroughly enjoying. So yeah, that was a brilliant question, actually.
Yeah, got another good one here for you. So, John Adair, whenever you're working with a talented player like Alfonso Davis, how much of his development was he's asking basically pre-planned in terms of minutes and situations, or did it go from a week-to-week basis, or how was that managed?
You know what? I thought we did a very good job with the Whitecaps. And when I say we, there's so many people that were involved. There were Carl Robinson, the first team manager, Gordon Forrest, Martin Pert, who were the assistant coaches with the first team. I was the head of the second team and worked very, very closely with them. And then it worked all the way down to the academy. And I think we worked very, very well in unison to help develop Alfonso. He came in and he went from, they were called the U16s at the time. They've adjusted the names now, but it went from the U16s to U18s to the reserves, which is the USL team, to MLS in less than a year. And we were all there just to guide him. And we all did it really together. We had HPIPP programs, which is a high performance player or individual development programs for every player that we're trying to push through the club. We obviously had one for him, and we had to manage his minutes to push him on. And the biggest example that I have, because it impacted me personally, is doing the right thing for Alfonso. At the end of the year, he had progressed to the first team. I would love for him to have played in our USL playoff run, because he would have helped me personally try win it. If he'd played in our USL Western Conference final, maybe we would have won the game. But instead, he was playing for the first team, which was better for him and was better for his development to be playing at a higher level at that time. So we managed that very, very closely. There were minutes, there were games. Even bigger than just the minutes in the games was, where does he train? Putting him in the best possible training environment and not rushing him too quickly. And Alfonso is an amazing kid. I'm still in touch with him. I was texting with him last week. He would come to us and be, can I go coach? Can I go train with the U16s? And we were like, well, you're training with the MLS team. Why do you want to go train with the U16s? He's like, I just wouldn't mind having a session with my friends. So we had to accommodate that. And you didn't have to. You could say, no, you're training with the first team. But we wanted to manage the person. He was a young kid. He's still a young kid. And you had to manage his personal well-being as well as his professional development.
So let's say Alfonso has an attitude problem, high talent attitude problem. Luis has asked, can you improve characters on the team? And if yes, how do you do it?
You know, in football, I'm a believer that you cannot treat everybody the same way, because different people come in with different personalities and different characters, of course, and you have different challenges with players. And Alfonso, first off, doesn't have an attitude. He's a laid-back, easygoing kid who just enjoys life, and he just happens to be very, very good at football. The higher you go, the more challenging it becomes. And I'll use an example from my career, where I thought we did a very, very good job of managing Fernando Adi in our USL. We traded for him because we're an MLS team, but we were in the USL. And here you have a designated player who's coming to your club. We happen to train on not the greatest turf in Nippert Stadium at the time. We don't have a grass field at our disposal, and we have a pretty average locker room, and our facilities and support were very, very USL-like. And we brought a player who here is a designated player. That's a player who is at the upper echelons of the game in North America. And we brought him in, and Adi's a 6 foot, I don't know how tall, big man. It's not a good environment to put him on to train on bad turf and have him training on turf every single day. So we worked with him, and Fernando's a special guy. He's a great guy. I still have a very good relationship with him, and he didn't train every single day. We had to manage his workloads. We had to include him in certain parts of the training session. When we were in the USL, we didn't even take him on certain games. And sometimes we took him and we told him, you're probably not going to play in this game, but we want you to come along just so the guys can see that you're part of the group. And I take my hat off to Adi. It was not easy for him going from being an MLS player to, I'm traded to an MLS team that happens to be in the USL at that time. And then when we started the 2019 preseason in MLS, he was absolutely flying. His leadership in preseason was brilliant, and people don't see that. He was working his absolute arse off to set the team up for success. He started very, very well through the first few games. He got hurt. Our season opener against Portland, who was his old team, unfortunately, and then things hit a downward spiral for everybody. He was injured, and lots of things didn't transpire the way we wanted to after that. So you have to figure out the pulse of the group, but you also have to figure out the pulse of the individual player. And that's very, very important. You cannot have the same rules for every player. We have rules and regulations within every team. We have rules and regulations within my team that I coach right now. We make a bit of fun and banter through it by having a fine wheel, a fine system, and we chastise the players because they have to stay within these rules and regulations. But within that framework, you have to manage every player in a slightly different way.
Staying along that theme then about the Alfonso as well and these development plans, Scott has asked about, can you talk more about HPP, IPP? In high school soccer, we have some players that perform at a much higher level with their clubs versus teammates who have never had that experience. The disparity is clear, and we want to manage both types of players. Any advice?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've thoroughly enjoyed the fact that I've coached at every level of the game. Like I've coached youth teams, I've coached amateur teams. I even coached my old high school team in South Africa. I got injured in 1993, and I went and coached that team when I was injured. I was a year out of high school, and I was coaching some of my friends. I've coached semi-professional, college, USL, MLS. What I enjoy is assessing players not just in one environment. And the biggest part of this was in college recruitment. So you go to all these different showcases and you watch players play for their club teams. And players carry themselves in certain ways when they're playing in that environment. I would go watch players play for their high school teams too. Because in a high school environment, you would hope a player who is playing for a club team, maybe one of the better players in the club team, might be in the middle. But when he goes and plays for his high school team, you want to see him embrace a leadership role. And I saw that from lots and lots of different players that I recruited. You'd see them playing club soccer and you'd see a certain side of them. You'd see a player who would be a good player, but maybe was a little shy or quieter in that environment. And then you go watch him play in his high school team, and all of a sudden he's this boisterous young lad who's leading the team. Those are the players that I got excited about. And you watch other players and they'd be in their high school team and they'd be the same. Their persona didn't change. They were the quiet player on the team, even though they were probably better than the players that they played on their high school team. They didn't really embrace that leadership role. Probably from a verbal perspective, they might have been doing it quietly with the guys in the classes or in the change room. But I've always enjoyed watching players play in different environments. So I've seen value in so many different types of the game. And particularly if you look in North America, there's obviously club soccer, there's high school soccer. I've always enjoyed watching both. And I don't think enough college coaches or professional players have gone out and tried to watch players play in all these different types of environments.
Very interesting. Probably, as expected, then we've moved on to what are your thoughts on the new MLS Academy structure? Do you think it will help aid player development?
That's interesting. Okay, I've never been directly involved in an academy. Obviously, with Vancouver, I was there and I was working essentially above or between the MLS and the academy. So I had oversight, and I was aware of different players, and I go watch lots of players play in that environment. And we didn't have an academy team in Cincinnati when I was working there. I think players can develop in different environments, and you can call different leagues what they are. Obviously, it's a bit of an evolution now of the game by canceling the DA program, and now the MLS teams, I would assume, are probably all going to come together and essentially create their own program, and maybe now just call it a different name. But it's probably not going to be as big or as inclusive as having more of the other youth clubs involved. So I'm probably not the best person to ask that question, but I think the more opportunities in this game, the better. And I think the more opportunities for players, coaches, anybody's role in the game, I think the more clubs that we have and the more people operating at a high level, the more opportunities there will be for players and people to progress in this game.
Brilliant. Natalie, can you give an example of some personal strategies you put in place, either formally or informally, when trying to implement your philosophy, beliefs, and values in the new environment? How do you get staff and players on board?
You know, it's interesting right now because we're all going through this pandemic, and I'm in a new project and it's a new team. So we had mass turnover. I was here for the last 2 weeks of the USL season last year, assessed the group that we had in place, decided which players we wanted to keep. We kept those players because they fit the culture and the philosophy and the style of play that I wanted to play. So I was fortunate to have a little core group of players. And then I went out and recruited the remaining players to come be part of that team. But I also went out and recruited the coaching staff that I wanted to have, because your system of play and your philosophy are equally important with your players as they are with your coaching staff. You cannot go and implement at this level a system of play or philosophy by yourself. You have to have buy-in from everybody. So I went out and I made sure, and I'm very, very happy with the two assistant coaches that I have here now. They both come from different backgrounds, which is huge, which allows us all to challenge each other in different ways, but there's distinct buy-in that we're all doing it together. We have chats with the coaching staff every single day. After training, we're together. We communicate what do we like, what we don't like, but also ensuring that we're all on the same page. And then when we go out and we speak to the team, we're all in unison. But we also allow the players to have a voice. And that's what we're doing a lot of right now. During this pandemic, we're having to be incredibly resourceful. I mentioned having the leadership forum earlier on, but we've also given the players tactical assignments. Like we're asking them to go out and we're trying to pick their brains for them to give us some thoughts. We're not just using this time because a lot of this time could be used as to this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to go do it. I have an idea of what I want us to do, and we went through that through preseason. We executed in our first game. We've one game, and that's all we've played. But we now want to try build on it during this phase by challenging the players and trying to be as resourceful as possible. Like a lot of these assignments that they're getting, I think at times for some of the players, they can see the value of it. At other times, players are like, oh, he's just giving us busy work. But no, there's an outcome that we're trying to achieve from all these different exercises that we're giving to the players.
Very good. Taylor has asked, how important is that you foster an environment where young players gain opportunities within the group? So I suppose how important is that pathway that they can get to the first team?
I think it's huge. I love playing young players, but I only am gonna play players that are quality. Nobody gets given anything in this game, so we have to create the environment that sets the young players up for success. And you can see talented players, and we have an affiliation with the Colorado Rapids, so we get a lot of their academy players that come in and train with our group. We've had a few of their players sign with us. So even in the first game of the season, we played several of those young players. But we have to create that nurturing, safe environment for the young lads to come in and feel part of the group, but also feel comfortable. Because once they feel comfortable, then they can start to express themselves. And we've had different players come here that some have come in and been brilliant from day one, and others have struggled. And if you're the best player on day one, doesn't mean you're going to be the best player on the last day. We have to set the environment that allows the players to come out of their shells, and we can help nurture them and provide them with that opportunity too at the same time. It's not easy. Developing young players is not as simplistic as as some people think it is. It can be a major challenge, but your environment is everything. That's what creates that safe haven for young players to come in to feel comfortable, and different players come in at different levels of comfort. Some guys are outgoing and they can fit in right away. Other young players, it takes some time. And then you have to find the right moment to give them an opportunity in a game. The worst thing you can do as a a coach or a manager is break a player by playing in a too high level too early. You have to find the right moment to integrate them and play and try to set them up for success, because players are going to fail at some stage, and coaches will fail too. But you want to try build them up as much as possible so they can have success and continue along that journey.
Reedy has asked, what advice would you give to a young coaches in the US system, college or youth, sorry, who are aspiring to coach professionally one day?
I'm going to steal some comments that people have passed on to me along this journey, because I think they're very, very valid. An MLS coach once told me, focus 90% of your time on your current job and 10% of your time on your next job. And he's 100% correct, because in this business, you shouldn't be and you won't be in the same job for your entire career. So focus everything, that 90%, but make sure you're spending some time preparing for the next job, wherever that is. And that's through networking, taking courses, exposing yourself to different challenges, so you're continually growing at the same time. And then at Simon Fraser University, when I played there, the assistant coach was Dave Elliott. And Dave went on to play professionally for the old Vancouver 86ers. He was also the assistant coach of one of the youth national teams in the Canadian program that went to a World Youth Cup. And he gave me my first full-time job. He was the head coach of the Simon Fraser program in the NAIA, and I joined him as his assistant coach on $5,000. I don't mind sharing that, for the year. And Dave's advice to me was run as many sessions as you can. And he's 100% spot on. If you are a young coach coaching at any level, go run as many sessions as you can. It doesn't matter what type of sessions. It could be team sessions, unit sessions, one-on-one sessions. Go expose yourself to the beautiful game and put yourself out there on the pitch as often as you can. It'll give you confidence. You'll grow, and challenge yourself. Like, challenge yourself to coach players that maybe don't suit your persona or don't suit your style, and go put yourself in some interesting positions, because that's what's going to allow you to come out of your box, to grow, and hopefully that'll help you along your journey.
Along those lines, Jack has asked about a coach, if you're overseas, does that have any changes with being overseas, how they would get to America or get on the radar of a coach over here?
Yeah, it's interesting. Hey, I love these conversations, because I've been fortunate enough to be living in 6 countries through this game. And you'll see some people that live on one side of the ocean want to get to the other side, and people that live on the other side want to get to the other side. So it's sometimes is greener across the pond, and it sometimes isn't. I don't think, this is just my personal take, I don't think people should, if you're focusing coaching as a profession, don't have a physical destination. Don't be, if you're living in Europe, and don't be, oh, I want to be in North America. And if you're in North America, don't be, I want to be in Europe. Go see how far you can go in the game in any environment, and be open to it. And that's part of the calculated gambles, I guess, because I'm willing to go anywhere in this journey. And I think the best way that a coach can develop in this game is don't put any parameters. Don't be, I want to go to this geographical location, because your best opportunity may come up somewhere else. If you're in Europe, the best opportunity may come up for you in Australia. But why are you focused on being in the US or Canada? Stay as open to it as you can possibly be. Obviously, different people's lifestyles and life situations may dictate where they need to go. So if you are trying to come, if I interpret the question correctly, he's trying to come from Europe to North America. If you're absolutely focused on trying to do that, sometimes you may have to go a level or two below where you think you may be in the pecking order of the global game. And sometimes you have to go take pay cuts, position cuts to go down and prove to people in your environment who and what you are. My family's immigrated from South Africa to my immediate family's all in Canada, and every single person in my family had to do that. They made sacrifices to go to Canada, and every person in the family had to go down a couple of different positions, not just in football, in every industry, to try work their way back up. So have an open mind and an open heart, and hopefully good things will happen.
Staying on the Canada topic there, you've Sanford, you've always provided opportunities for Canadian players in your teams. With the new import rule in the USL, will you still look for ways to find Canadian players and talent?
100%. It's Canada gave me an opportunity, and I want to continue to give Canadian players opportunities too. But they need to be good enough. Nothing comes for free in this game. The new rule moving forward next year in the USL is going to make it more challenging for Canadian players because this season they're domestic players. Now next year they're going to have to compete with everybody else for international spots. I'm definitely very, very well aware and connected in Canada, so I'm aware of a lot of the players there. I have 3 Canadian players on my team here right now, and if they perform, I see absolutely no reason why they wouldn't be on our team next year. So it is going to make it more challenging. It kind of narrows the window of opportunities for young Canadians, but if a player is good enough, they're going to grab the opportunities and take them.
And last couple for you here. If anyone has, we've nearly done all the questions. So if you've got one more, we'll take one more. Question I have for you, Alan. You mentioned that another interview I saw or read there yesterday. You're using the time, obviously to connect with the team and to keep working on those leadership groups and tactical projects. You're also using it for individual development. Is there a team at the minute that you're gravitating towards watching every night or every day? Are you going through a set of games, or what kind of soccer are you watching?
Yeah, I've watched a lot of, I've tried to, this is more as the coach, I've tried to focus on other coaches than teams. And I've gone and done some research, and I've looked at a lot of Bielsa in the last few weeks, and I've managed to speak to some people that have worked with him very, very closely, and have really picked their brain as to what it was like to work with him. Because when you read a book or you see a documentary, you only see certain sides. You see what the author who writes the book wants to put down, or you see a documentary, you see whatever the producer wants to put into it. But the real world can be very, very different at times. And I've really tried to pick some people's brains as to what's it like to be around the guy every day. What sort of things does he do well? And what sort of things are his challenging areas? Because we all have challenging areas. And really delved into him a lot. And then obviously because it's been him, we've gone into Leeds United quite a lot because that's his current stop. So I've really enjoyed that. I've challenged my assistant coaches. I've been sending them articles and different bits of information about him just to promote conversation amongst ourselves, so we can all learn from it. I don't want to just grow from this experience. I want my staff to grow. I want our players to grow. But that's the one area that I really challenge ourselves as a coaching staff is looking at Bielsa. And we'll move on to somebody else's. I guess the positive byproduct of this pandemic, if it goes on for a long time, we're going to be researching a lot of different coaches and getting a lot of different thoughts. But we're not going to sit back and waste the time. I'm reading as much as we can. Some people might have read this book. So I'm actually reading for the second time because we talk a lot about culture with our team, and we're going to delve tomorrow in our leadership forum into commitment culture with them. So just trying to expose myself as much as possible to different thoughts, and some people think the same, but also challenge myself by exposing myself to people that may think in a different manner.
Really interesting. Okay, so last one for you, and on the Bielsa, and I'm not going to ask you to divulge what you've collected so far, but for someone who is mega intense, how do you manage, or what's your thoughts on managing this intensity in a daily environment, but also being at enough space and support for people to grow? How do you pull that off in professional football?
It's funny. It's so interesting because he's a brilliant example of it. He is as intense as you can possibly get, and he rubs people the wrong way. And I don't think he doesn't worry about rubbing people the wrong way, but he's actually able to do it because of the success that he's had. So who we are today, a lot of the time, is dictated by what we've achieved in the past and the leverage that you actually have to be able to go out and do that. Somebody like him who's truly at the upper echelons of the game, he can go and he can manage a group in a very, very different way than I could. If I got the job at Leeds United tomorrow, I could not run it, and I probably wouldn't want to run it the exact same way that he runs it to this day. So yeah, you have to, it's so interesting to find that balance between intensity and then managing the group. And I'm very, very intense at times, and then other times I can be quite relaxed. And who I share those different sides of my persona or my style with changes every single day, because it's very, very difficult to open yourself completely. And I like to be open. I've always wanted to be open with my staff and with my players, but there's certain times that you have to be one way, and there's certain times that you have to be another way to manage the pulse of your group, but also manage the pulse of an individual player within that group.
Because you can't be too soft as well, can't you? Like, as much as we say authentic is great and this is great, player friendly is great, but you can't be too soft. Would you agree with that? Or
100%. I have more players that I would anticipate that dislike me than like me than I've worked with. But I would hope every player respects what we were trying to do and where we were trying to go with a group. Because you don't get into professional football management to be liked. This is a business where you're completely exposed, and particularly in this day and age where we have to cut players. You have to, unfortunately, you have to destroy people's dreams. And that's the harsh reality of the business. And then people go share those stories with people and in social media and all those different types of things. So you cannot go into this business at the upper echelons and be focused on, do people like me? Because at the end of the day, you have to manage for results. And those results are player development, and then obviously trying to win games too at the same time. And a lot of the time you're pushing a player to help him improve. And some players can see that, and some players cannot see that. Some players are open to being pushed, and some players do not like being pushed. And you have to find the very, very fine balance of when to push and when not to push. Emmanuel Ledesma, who we had with us in FC Cincinnati, who was the USL MVP in 2018. He was the epitome of that type of player who, the guy worked his absolute backside off every single day. But there were days where I had to put my arm around him and show him love and make him feel supported. And there are other days where I had to go in and push him. And he was a very mature professional. He's played all over the world, and he knew, even when he didn't like it, you could see in his face, he didn't like it at the time. We would often just allow things to settle for 20, 30 minutes, or he'd go take a shower afterwards and he'd come into the office and we'd talk, and he's like, I understand. But not every player has that football IQ or that intelligence level to actually understand why you're pushing them and trying to make them better every single day.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Outstanding. Already getting people messaging here that this has been unbelievable. So, Alan, I can't thank you enough. Fantastic. It's flown.
No problem, Gary. I appreciate it. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Thanks a million.
No problem. Stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you on the sidelines with Colorado soon. But best of luck with the season, and we'll keep in touch.
Appreciate it. Be safe to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, bye-bye.